Hey y'all, welcome to the Halloween Iceberg created by Angel12416 from good old Reddit. I thought it would be pretty fun to go over an iceberg for the films since I'm such a huge fan of this franchise. If you want me to cover other horror franchises, like the video and leave a comment. I'm thinking I'll cover the Friday the 13th franchise next if people want me to. If you're unfamiliar with what an iceberg is, basically it's a bunch of trivia regarding a franchise. The top of the iceberg was fairly well-known information, but as you get closer to the bottom, it becomes much more obscure. Anyways, onto the iceberg. First off, we have the anthology plan. There's actually a bit of misconception regarding the anthology plan. Most people get the idea that Halloween was supposed to be an anthology from the very beginning. This isn't true. The original Halloween was supposed to come out, and that was it. No sequels. When Halloween 2 was brought up, it was always going to be about Michael Myers. Halloween 3 was the first anthology film in the series and did spark the idea that every movie afterwards could be some sort of Halloween story, all of them unrelated to each other, but Halloween 3 didn't make enough money, so the series went back to Michael Myers. Jamie Lloyd. Jamie Lloyd is the main protagonist in Halloween 4 and 5, along with appearing in Halloween 6. She's the daughter of Laurie Strode. She's played by Danielle Harris. In most of the films, except for Halloween 6, she wanted to play the character again and was in the process of getting the role. She needed some papers done since she was 17. There's some weird stuff in Halloween 6. We'll get into it later, but basically she needed to be an adult for it, unless she got permission. But they did it without her, to the dismay of fans and everyone on set. J.C. Brandy was a replacement and was treated very coldly simply because she wasn't Danielle Harris. Poor thing. Dead by Daylight crossover. Michael Myers makes a playable appearance in Dead by Daylight. It's the gameplay you're seeing right now. Where this is just referring to the new H40 timeline, which consists of Halloween 2018, kills, and ends. I don't know why it's referred to as the final timeline, since Michael Myers will most certainly be coming back. Thorn Cult. The Thorn Cult is an explanation for why Myers kills people. That started in Halloween 5, but was really explained in Halloween 6. They basically just put evil into people and make them kill people. Different timelines. The Halloween franchise has a ton of timelines. You could really stretch the amount of timelines to a ridiculous extent. You can have one with just the original, one with just Halloween 1 and 2, one with Halloween 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6, one with Halloween 2, H20, and Resurrection, one with just the Rob Zombie films, and the most recent one being Halloween 1, 2018 Kills and Ends. Lots of different timelines. Rob Zombie's reboot. Rob Zombie made Halloween remakes that changed Michael's backstory. There were plans to make a third film in 2 different instances, but eventually shot down both times in favor of a reboot of the franchise. Considering Halloween 2018 is the highest grossing slasher of all time, probably the right call. Dr. Loomis. Loomis is Michael's doctor, played by the late Donald Pleasance, who was drunk for the majority of filming and did great. He also only accepted the role of Dr. Loomis because his daughter likes John Carpenter's music on Assault on Precinct 13. But Pleasance was not Carpenter's first choice for the character. Carpenter really wanted Christopher Lee for the role, but Lee turned it down. Lee has actually come out and said he regrets turning it down. Peter Cushing was also wanted for the role, but he just did a little thing called Star Wars. He was just too expensive. The Shape. In the end credits, Michael Myers is referred to as the Shape, since the idea of the character is that Michael isn't human. It is merely evil taking the shape of a man. Michael Myers. Michael Myers is the main antagonist of the Halloween franchise. He's played by Nick Castle, who has been friends with John Carpenter since high school, but the role has been taken by many other actors in the first film alone, which we'll get into later. Laurie Strode. Laurie Strode is the main protagonist, played by Jamie Lee Curtis. But like Loomis, she wasn't the first actress considered for the role. Anne Lockhart was the first choice, but Jamie was chosen because her name had some star power. Well, not really her name, but her mother, Janet Leigh, who played the iconic shower victim in Psycho. Myers House. The Myers House is the house Michael Myers grew up in. It mostly appears the same, except for in Halloween 5. It takes a drastically different appearance, being much bigger than usual. The reason for this being they couldn't find a house in Salt Lake City, Utah that looked like the Myers house. I grew up in Utah and I've actually been to the house. I was just really confused as a kid and thought the tour guide messed up. It looked nothing like the Mikey house until I rewatched Halloween 5, and then it all came together. The Devil's Eyes. I'm not sure if this is referring to Loomis's famous speech talking about the Myers character, or if it's talking about the comic by the same name, which follows Tommy Doyle hunting down Michael Myers, similar to Halloween 6. In case it's going over the actual speech, I'll go over it very quickly. The Devil's Eyes is one of the biggest characterization moments for Michael. It's meant to just tell the audience outright what Michael Myers is. That's really the whole point of the Loomis character in general, to hype up Michael as more than a man. Without Loomis, a lot of Michael's feats could be chalked up to Laurie being paranoid, but you have Loomis putting the ideas of the paranormal in the audience's head. Any doubt about Myers being human leaves at the very end when Michael takes 6 shots to the chest, falling off of a balcony and blinking away in an instant. William Shatner mask. The original Michael Myers mask is a William Shatner mask painted white, eye holes cut open a bit more, and the hair messed around with a bit. There was a few drafts for different Michael masks. The runner-up for Michael's mask was going to be a clown mask going off of what he wore as a kid. But as soon as the Shatner mask was fully painted and tested out, it was a no-brainer which one they were going to go with. Farmer and Lucier H3D draft. Halloween 3 was supposed to be a sequel to Rob Zombie's Halloween film written by Todd Farmer and directed by Patrick Lucier. Apparently it was supposed to go back to John Carpenter's original, not sure in what way, since the original Rob Zombie Halloween remake took a lot from the original to begin with, so kind of confused by that. Charlie Bowles. Charlie Bowles is a man that went crazy and killed his family. He's the killer the Gravedigger is referring to until Loomis cuts him off at the graveyard. Charlie has his own comic short called Halloween Charlie. Halloween 2600. Halloween 2600 was a Halloween video game made for the Atari 2600 and is the only Halloween video game to be released to this date. At least a big console, and there was a weird mobile one, but I don't count that. You play as what is presumed to be Laurie Strode and rescue kids. The Producer's Cut. The Producer's Cut is an alternate cut for Halloween 6 that is more plot heavy. For a really long time, this cut wasn't available to the public until released with the Halloween collection in 2014. This really was the original cut of the movie until tested with audience members. Most didn't like it. They didn't like Michael being treated like a lapdog for a cult, and Michael being a, how do I put this? A father. Extensive retakes were done to make Michael a lot less controllable and less fathery. Sort of just glimpse over the father aspect of the film in the theatrical cut. Cynthia Myers. Cynthia Myers is Laurie Strode. It was her birth name in the Halloween 2 timeline before being adopted by a new family. This isn't to be confused by Cynthia Strode, who is Laurie's mother in the Rob Zombie films. The Babysitter Murders. Halloween was originally going to not take place on Halloween at all. The premise was the same: man breaks out and hunts down babysitters, so it was called The Babysitter Murders. They decided to change it to Halloween upon realization that no other film had been titled Halloween, and it just gave the film more identity. Film novelizations. Several of the Halloween films have had novelizations going in more details on aspects not in the films. I've been reading the 2018 one, and it's a great read so far. The original film had a novelization that's a little stranger. It goes into detail on Michael's reasons for killing, saying he hears voices, a hateful spirit named Edna. Michael talks as a kid, and all sorts of weird stuff. Halloween 7, The Revenge of Laurie Strode. I couldn't find out exactly what this is, but I'm pretty sure I have heard of it. I think this was the original Halloween 20 years later. Instead of being a reboot, it was going to be a sequel to H6, retconning Laurie ever dying in this timeline and instead just in hiding. After hearing about the death of her daughter, she'd get revenge. Pretty sure it was changed to H20 since this premise makes Laurie look like a terrible, neglectful mother, since she sort of just abandons Jamie with this idea. That and After Scream was successful, and within the film they mentioned Halloween several times. Mustafa Akkad saw the chance to make a much more successful Halloween film, so they edited what they were making, twisted around a few things. We're gonna get into this more later. It's a bit of a doozy, but they basically went from making a Halloween home release movie to giving it the highest budget a Halloween film had at the time. Blonde Michael. This could be referring to many things. It could be referring to Ben Tramer, who was a teenager wearing a blonde Michael Myers mask who was mistaken for Mikey and killed in Halloween 2. It could be referring to a test mask used in Halloween 4 that wasn't repainted and actually made it into the film. Or it could be referring to Michael himself. As a kid, he has blonde hair, but as an adult, it darkens. Pick your favorite. Michael's scene with Busta Rhymes. This is a weird one, but really interesting. So there were some cutscenes from Halloween Resurrection, as there are usually with any film. This cutscene is a bit stranger than most. While Busta Rhymes and our other protagonists are making out of the Mikey house towards the end of the film, Michael falls on top of Busta Rhymes, chokes him till he's unconscious, but Busta is saved by Bianca, who hits Myers with a wooden plank. The wording after this is a bit confusing. It says, after Myers was hit by the wooden plank, someone goes back into the Mikey house. I don't know why Bianca would run back into the place of danger, maybe to get Busta, but it could be referring to Michael running back into the house, but Busta's already saved. Regardless, the outcome of the entire scene has never been released, but all of this has been filmed. There were some screenshots of its existence, and it was shown at test screenings, which is why this was changed, since it didn't get a very good reaction out of audiences, and they wanted more Busta Rhymes, so we got more Busta Rhymes in the end film. Myers film in Halloween 3. On a TV in a bar, the trailer for the original Halloween plays, meaning Michael Myers is technically in every single Halloween film. Some fans that like Halloween 3 to be in the same timeline of the original Halloween film like to say the original events of the first film were made into a movie, just so that Halloween still has one big happy timeline from 1 to 6. Chaos Comic Trilogy. The Chaos Comic Trilogy was a comic series released in 2000 and 2001. They bridge Halloween 20 years later to the Thorn Trilogy, which would make it one big giant timeline instead of being broken apart. So, funnily enough, this makes another timeline. The Killer Inside Me. The Killer Inside Me was an unmade script for Halloween 5, written in 5 days. Funny. In the script, Loomis would want to straight up kill Jamie. Jamie's psychic connection to Myers was much more prevalent and would have a pretty high body count. If you want to know more about it, the channel We Watched Movie covered it in more detail. Laurie faked her death in Thorn Timeline. This once again is remnants of H20 originally being a sequel to Halloween 6. Laurie still actually faked her death in H20, but there's actually a deleted scene mentioning Jamie, apparently. We're going to be talking about that more later. Once again, it was cut because it makes her seem like a pretty horrible person. Halloween TV editions. The Halloween TV edition was an extended cut of the original 1978 film. They added scenes to the film since it was too short to be aired on television. So to remedy this problem, scenes connecting the original to the second film were made. This had little segments of Myers as a child, Michael's court case, stuff like that. It's pretty easy to find these scenes if you want to look them up. Emmett Kelly Clown Mask. The Emmett Kelly Clown Mask was the cut mask we talked about before. In fact, it was the very first option they went with for a possible Myers mask before settling on the William Shatner mask. Mental asylum inspiration. Michael Myers was sort of inspired by a real-life child. John Carpenter went to a mental institution for a school class. While there, he saw a child with a soulless gaze. The kid seemed disconnected from everything. This kid would be an inspiration for Michael Myers and had a very heavy influence on Loomis's famous speech on Michael Myers. H4 Ditterman Draft. I think this is referring to an unmade Halloween 4 movie in which Myers was literally haunting the town of Haddonfield, appearing as a phantom to the residents of Haddonfield. It's actually fairly similar to the idea of Halloween Ends. Of course, he's not a phantom in the film, but the whole town is left scarred after Michael's rampage and Halloween Kills. Laurie would still be the main protagonist, and Loomis would be her psychiatrist. Taking Shape books. The Taking Shape books are in-depth books going into the history of the Halloween franchise. I haven't read them, but I want to get my hands on them. CGI mask. In Halloween 20 years later, a CGI mask was used in one scene of the film, and it looks awful. This mask was most likely made since there was a constant arguing on what the mask should look like in H20. Because of this, multiple masks ended up being used. I'm sure this scene had a different mask altogether, and the director was attempting to see if a CGI mask could be used to create a consistent mask throughout the film, a sort of plaster fix over older masks they didn't want used, which is a shame because in the very first scene, an altered Halloween 6 mask was used, which is a pretty rad mask, but someone on set didn't like it and it was changed again and again and again. Production mistakes. Halloween 1978 has plenty of production mistakes, some of which includes cast members' smoke being visible at times. One scene, everything looks perfectly sunny, and the next, it looks as if it just rained. Child's Play is canon with Halloween 4 to 6. In Bride of Chucky, Michael's mask can be seen as evidence. However, because of the recent Chucky TV show, the character Jake mentions Jamie Lee Curtis in Halloween, so whatever mask is in lockup was most likely just a copycat killer. Way to go, Jake. Ruined it for everybody. Michael likes cats. There are a few pieces of evidence that could go to the conclusion that Michael likes cats. As we've seen multiple times, Michael will kill dogs. He's done so multiple times, but in every instance he's had a chance to kill a cat, he hasn't. In Halloween 5, he leaves a litter of cats alone, and in the official novelization for Halloween 2018 to test Michael's bloodlust, 2 cats are left within Michael's room overnight. Both are left unharmed. Blood ties. The only thing I could find on this was an unmade movie. A new relative of Myers was going to be brought in along with a copycat killer. Wynn taught Michael to drive. A very famous plot point of confusion in the original film is, how did Myers learn to drive? Halloween 6 explains that the cult leader Wynn taught Myers how to drive while incarcerated. Who is Wynn, you might ask? Well, he's the guy in the original Halloween that argues with Loomis walking out to the doctor's car. Of course, everyone's favorite character. Novel's timeline. The novel's timeline is the timeline for novels written on the films that mostly follow the H2 timeline, but things get different once the books get to the 4th film. The novels never enter the cult explanation. This Myers is just a psychopath that wants to kill his family. He also grunts and growls, which Myers doesn't really do all that often outside of the Rob Zombie films. It eventually goes into the Scream Factory novel trilogy, which we'll get into later. Brittany Lloyd, Steffi Jameson, Amanda Hatch. Brittany Lloyd was the original name for Jamie Lloyd in a draft script for Halloween 4 by Daniel Kenney. Laurie was going to have an entirely different daughter named Steffi. As for Amanda, I'm not entirely sure. I'm assuming it was supposed to either be a different name for Jamie or a different daughter. Halloween 4 Etchison draft. Once again, this goes back to the canceled Halloween 4 script. Apparently, towards the end, Michael took a whole bunch of bullets and grew to be 10 feet tall. Wild stuff. The H4 Kenny Medina draft. Another draft for Halloween 4. In this draft, Loomis is once again Laurie's psychiatrist, but Myers also gets a leather jacket fit. Yep, you heard that right. Rocker Michael Myers. How wild. He would also be electrocuted and explode at some point. I didn't know Halloween 4 went through so many drafts. Voodoo Magician. This is a reference to who originally saved Michael Myers in Halloween 5, I'm pretty sure. Originally, he was rescued by a cultist who puts the Cult of Thorn tattoo on Myers in the first place. There is very little remaining footage of the scene that survived. Its remnants can be viewed on the Halloween Complete collection. Halloween One Good Scare. Halloween One Good Scare is a comic series that takes place in the H20 timeline. Myers is after Lindsay Wallace, who is the little girl in the original film. Lindsay gets help from Daniel Loomis, son to Dr. Sam Loomis. Michael does end up killing Lindsay. This, in the Halloween universe, is pretty nuts, since the character of Lindsay never dies in any timeline to this day. She somehow managed to live in each one. Well, except for this niche comic, I suppose, which has me wondering if Tommy Doyle fared any better in this universe. 6 people played Myers in the original. This stems partially on rumors. It's not entirely confirmed that 6 people played the character. It could be more or it could be less. While Nick Castle played Myers for the majority of the film, a dog trainer played the shape during the scene with Michael killing a poor canine friend. A stunt coordinator played Myers during the breaking of the closet scene since he knew exactly where to hit the door to make it fall apart. Tony Moran during the unmasking scene. It's also rumored Deborah Hill played Michael during some far distance shots since nobody else was on set. It is confirmed that Deborah played the child POV portion of Michael Myers. John himself might have donned the mask at some point during the movie. Just a lot of people played Michael. For the original film. Wynn survived. This is just a theory that Wynn survived at the end of Halloween 6. I couldn't find any discussion on the theory. H20 FX scenes. The FX scenes were additional or cut scenes for television. These scenes included a completely different death for Marion, additional stalking scenes, but also censorship of certain dialogue, and the ending is cut as soon as Laurie is swinging the axe. It trims up a lot of the violence for TV. Audrey Myers. Audrey is Michael's middle name, but is also the name of Michael's mother in the Chaos comics. In novelizations, she is also given the name Edith. Hutchison H3D Draft, another cancelled sequel to Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. Not sure exactly what the idea behind this film was, but the book Taking Shape 2 goes over it. Halloween 30 Years of Terror. 30 Years of Terror is a comic series in the H20 timeline. It has 5 short stories revolving around Myers, Laurie, Loomis, and others. Michael learned to drive from Loomis. In the 1978 novelization of Halloween, Myers watches Loomis while the doctor takes him to court cases. This is how Myers learns how to drive without the cult explanation. Scream Factory Myers Place Madhouse. This is a trilogy of books that we mentioned earlier. It roughly goes over the same story as the original films with its own twists and turns. In the timeline, Michael actually wins the first encounter. He was never caught and he kills Laurie Strode. He now goes on a rampage every Halloween. If you want to learn more about it, I highly recommend Dr. Wolfila's review on it. H20's Thorn trilogy scene. Like mentioned before, originally H20 was going to be connected to 6, but after realizing it would make Laurie a terrible mother, retcons were put into place, including a scene with the mention of Jamie in it. Not entirely sure how legit this scene is, but apparently it exists. Tommy and Lindsay cameo in H4. This blew my mind finding out about this. Maybe I just wasn't paying enough attention, but Tommy Doyle and Lindsay Wallace, the 2 kids in the original film, both appear in Halloween 4. Lindsay is this character and Tommy is this character. Her being in Halloween 4 means she survives every single film timeline. Halloween 6, Tarantino's idea. Yep, that's right, Quentin Tarantino was offered a chance to make Halloween 6. He declined, but he toyed with the idea of making one. His idea was basically just Wynn and Myers would go on a road trip and kill a bunch of people. Halloween Night Dance. Halloween Night Dance is a mini-series that takes place between H20 and Resurrection. It also features the Charlie Bowles killer in this short little story. Halloween, The First Death of Laurie Strode. This is a pretty cool comic released in 2008. It takes place after 1978 and begins with Annie's funeral. Of course, Myers is still out there stalking Laurie. Jimmy from Halloween 2 makes an appearance as well. Seems like a pretty cool read. Tommy Jarvis visited Smith's Grove. In Friday the 13th Part 5, a list of places Tommy Jarvis stayed at to receive help is heard. And sure enough, Smith's Grove is one of them, which is the sanitarium Myers is held in. A cute Easter egg, but also could be used to connect the 2 universes together. Halloween, Age 25. Age 25 years later was going to be a sequel to Halloween Resurrection, which would have included Busta Rhymes. Every single victim of Myers would have made an appearance sharing their story on how Myers impacted their lives, similar to Halloween Kills, and weirdly enough, it had some similarities to Jason X. Myers would have been taken in for testing. If you want more details on this, We Watched a Movie made an in-depth video on it. To Mrs. Blankenship's. I couldn't figure out exactly what this one is talking about. Mrs. Blankenship is a character in Halloween 6 that babysat Myers as a child and knew Michael was hearing voices. She was a member of the Cult of Thorn, but I'm not entirely sure what it means by there being 2 of them. There is a reference to a Blankenship in Halloween 3. Maybe that's what this is referring to. Michael named after Miracle Studios' boss. John named his boogeyman Michael Myers, which was the name of the head of a British company, Miracle Films, which distributed his film Assault on Precinct 13. This was a way to say thank you. Halloween, The Missing Year. You know how every single film was about Michael Myers except for Halloween 3? Well, screenwriter Jake Wall wanted to connect the films. The Missing Years was going to be a film about what Myers was doing during Halloween 3, which would mean every single Halloween film was connected in some way to that point. The film would have also gone back in time and looked at Michael's childhood, which could have been interesting. A movie between Loomis and Michael is something I felt could have been pretty cool. Have to do it very carefully, but Loomis trying to help Michael at first until realizing he's too far beyond help. His attempts at compassion turning into a drive to keep him locked up for good. Zombie tried to do something like this, but Michael was just too human in the film for it to feel like Michael Myers. I think a crack at this idea with a more faithful approach to the character could be interesting, but could also very easily backfire. There is, however, already a comic series that does it, and it's pretty cool. Halloween Exists with A Nightmare on Elm Street. Strap yourselves in, this entry has an extremely wild story about it. This wasn't discovered until very recently when YouTuber Sean Clark, go check out the video, it's very interesting, was filming inside Nancy's house from Nightmare on Elm Street. While sets were used, a real-life location was also used. There was a rocking horse in the room that he knew he had seen before. Eventually, it hit him. The exact same rocking horse can be found in Laurie's house, specifically the scene shot for the TV edition. So in some strange, weird way, Laurie and Nancy share the exact same house. Wild. What are the chances that two of the most iconic slasher flicks' final girls share the same house? The house must have had some sort of aura to it. Asylum 2005. Asylum was an unmade sequel to Halloween Resurrection. Busta Rhymes would be coming back and he'd be suffering from some Myers PTSD. You won't believe this next bit. Despite Michael Myers actually surviving the end of Halloween Resurrection, I guess the people behind the film didn't want to give Myers a new electrocuted look. Do you remember the really dumb plot point in Resurrection that made Halloween 20 Years Later's plot way less awesome? A quick spoiler warning for Halloween 20's ending if you aren't familiar with it. Laurie chops off Michael's head, but since at the time a contract said Myers couldn't die, a sequel was made explaining that it wasn't really Myers. He swapped places with a nearby worker, crushed his windpipe so he couldn't speak. It's incredibly dumb, and it's an idea used again in Asylum 2005. Michael switches places with the victim so Michael can retain his pretty face. I can't believe that after how awful the first switcheroo was perceived, the higher-ups were like, what if we did it again? It would have gotten Looney Tunes to that level if it made it through. Michael does kill Busta Rhymes in the opening of the film. The entirety of the script is online if you want to check it out for yourself. Thorn Trilogy is a comic made by H20 Tommy. I couldn't find much of anything on this, but I'm guessing it's just a fan theory implying the Thorn Trilogy was just a story Tommy wrote up. He was a writer at one point, we'll get to that soon, so that could connect the two. Murphy Myers. Murphy Myers is Michael's great-great-grandfather in the Chaos comics. Murphy was one of the worshippers of the Druids. While fearing for a group of fellow worshippers, he led them all west. They found Haddonfield and planted their roots there. In a weird way, the Myers family discovered Haddonfield. In the Chaos comics, that is. Halloween, the Mark of Thorn. Halloween, the Mark of Thorn was a canceled comic series. Tommy Doyle is a writer. His editor convinces him to make fictionalized events about Michael Myers. I bet you didn't think I'd be talking about author Tommy so soon. Not too much else is known about this canceled comic series, though. Halloween Returns. Halloween Returns is an unmade Halloween reboot that we were extremely close to getting. It was going to be a film made in 2015 and would serve as a sequel to Halloween 2. Myers would be nearly executed until a power outage saves him. He then hunts down Officer Gary Hunt's daughter throughout the film. Gary Hunt was the officer in Halloween 2 that took over after Officer Brackett lost his daughter Annie. The only reason this film ended up not happening was because Dimension lost the rights to the Halloween franchise. The rights went to Blumhouse, and the David Gordon Green trilogy was made. Donna Carvey cameo. Donna Carvey is a famous comedian that made his first film debut in Halloween 2. He doesn't have a very large role, he just plays an assistant to a news reporter. He appears twice and never speaks. Originally, he had a lot more scenes, ones in which he would have spoken as well, but they were cut, most likely for pacing reasons. Two Faces of Evil. Remember when I mentioned H20 was going to be a low-budget, straight-to-television film? Well, here we go. Halloween 2 Faces of Evil was going to be the original Halloween 20 years later. Why was this changed? Scream. Scream happened. Halloween was mentioned several times in the very successful Scream film, so they decided to instead make the most expensive Halloween film. The script would have Myers tracking down Laurie's sister's daughter, a long-lost relative of the Myers family. It still takes place in a college, but Myers would be receiving help. Myers would have a big fan of his, a magician. He'd help Myers kill his target. At the end of the film, Myers would be shot, but surprise, it's just the magician. And get this, the magician's final words before dying would have been, "I made Michael disappear," leaving the door open for more sequels. I'm glad we ended up getting H20. H20 Michael was a copycat killer. This could be referencing two things. The first being a fan theory. The theory is something along these lines. Michael Myers was burned to a crisp in Halloween 2, and there are no burn marks on Michael's hands in H20. So fans like to believe that the Myers in H20 isn't the real one, just someone really obsessed with the Myers story. The other explanation is much more interesting, since it's something that actually does exist. If you remember the Two Faces of Evil script, well, there are actually remnants of that script that were pulled into H20. Charlie, friend of Laurie's son, John Tate, was originally going to be a copycat killer. At first, it was just going to be him killing people until the real Myers shows up and kills him. If you rewatch H20, you can actually see glimpses of this. The dude is a bit of a creep. The reason they wanted to keep this was because of Scream having its two killers. Since it worked so well for Scream, why not Halloween? Looking back at it, there were tons of attempts for a copycat Myers killer. It took them forever to finally do it. Hellraiser crossover. A Pinhead vs. Myers movie was in the discussion in the 90s. It would explain that Myers was handed the Lament configuration as a child. After messing with the box, Myers would become possessed by Saw itself, explaining why he can't die. This would pique the interest of Pinhead, and they'd fight. It was flat out rejected in the 90s, but after the success of Freddy vs. Jason, the idea was brought up again. It nearly took off, even having Carpenter on board, but there was one man insisting that there is no way this should happen. Mustafa Akkad. He owned the Halloween rights and wanted nothing to do with Hellraiser. He held a poll on the official Halloween site at the time asking how many people would be interested in a crossover. 54% of voters said no, convincing Akkad it shouldn't be done. Original H2 concept. John Carpenter wanted nothing to do with the Halloween sequel, so it was handed off to Rick Rosenthal. Originally, Halloween 2 was going to take place a few years after the original. Myers would track down Laurie Strode in her high-rise apartment. Carpenter later came back on board, and we got the Halloween 2 we all know. Killer Danny plan. Danny Strode is the son of Kara Strode in Halloween 6. It is heavily hinted that he was supposed to become the next Michael Myers, chosen by the Cult of Thorn to carry on his legacy. It's not too far of a stretch to say he was intended to have a much bigger role. They hint at many parallels between Danny and Myers, both hearing voices, both even being blonde, one of the most evil traits of them all. It seems any plans to have Danny continue the Myers role was scrapped. Halloween 3000, a canceled sequel to Halloween 6. In the script, Michael Myers is explained to have died at the end of H6. The 6 syringe shots filled with the goop he received actually did kill him. Instead, this would feature another copycat killer by the name of Jimmy. I always knew Jimmy was a shifty man. Jimmy would kill people until Tommy Doyle blows him up with a rocket launcher. Wow. Jamie Lee in Halloween 3. Despite Halloween 3 Season of the Witch not actually taking place in the Michael Myers timeline, Jamie Lee does make an uncredited cameo. She voices the announcer going over the new curfew time and another cameo as Santa Mira's telephone operator. Halloween White Ghost. Halloween White Ghost is a comic series with character Christopher Hastings as its protagonist. You know the dude Michael kills off screen for his jumpsuit? That guy. Chris really likes a girl named Sylvia, and drama ensues. Eventually, Sylvia dies from a train because Christopher trips. Way to go, Christopher. Way to get her killed. He gets upset until eventually encountering the shape. Michael kills him and he gets to see Sylvia again. Halloween Returns to Haddonfield. Halloween Returns to Haddonfield is a rare 2003 comic. Partially. It's actually a magazine with a short comic in it with a bunch of other things as well. It has a segment that details guests of the Halloween franchise, an entire map of Haddonfield, something I would love to get my hands on, and something that I haven't really heard of, a CD that is meant to go with the short comic. I don't know if this was a completely new track or returning one from a film, but it's such a rad idea to put you in the mood for the story you're about to read. Halloween Haddonfield. I can't figure out exactly what this is referring to, whether it's an unfinished comic or a movie. I can't quite find it, but I don't want to leave you guys hanging without a fun little bit of trivia. So, fun thing about Haddonfield, Illinois is, well, Haddonfield wasn't shot in Illinois at all. It was shot in California. There are moments throughout the original Halloween you can actually see palm trees, and the leaves were placed there by crew members and had to be picked up in between scenes. Halloween-topsis. Halloween-topsis is a tag-on comic that came with the Halloween documentary called Halloween 25 Years of Terror. The story takes place in 1993. It follows a photographer that's had a pretty rough life. He went to see a movie with his dad, and his father had a heart attack, dying at the movie. Pretty awful movie experience. He goes on with life feeling pretty empty inside, and his photography life isn't doing all that great. Eventually, his editor shows him a picture of the dead Annie Brackett. His editor tells him to track down Myers for the big bucks. While Patrick outwardly expresses his disgust, deep down this is the sort of morbid reality he's always wanted to capture. Patrick is an edgy man. Halloween 666, The Origins of Evil. This is a bit of a wild one. Imagine if Halloween 6 and Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 had a child. That is basically what this unmade Halloween 6 idea was. Tommy Doyle would still be in it, being far more obsessive than he was in the 6 we got. Loomis is straight up locked up in Smith's Grove. We'd have a completely new female protagonist who would dream of Myers, similar to Jamie. Why not just have Jamie? I don't know. And of course we have Myers. He's homeless, hanging around a homeless shelter. The people at the homeless shelter even like him. How bizarre. In one scene, 4 angry men would beat up Myers until he puts on the mask and kills them, which is something that basically happens in the second Rob Zombie film. I wonder if this unfinished film was a bit of an inspiration for Rob while making his movie. Halloween Resurrection was an in-universe film. This seems to be a fan theory to help fans sleep at night pretending Halloween Resurrection isn't even real within its own universe. It's basically just a theory saying that the film itself is a film made in universe. It's very self-explanatory, really. So this would be saying H20's ending really happened. Myers is dead, and this film was made within the universe to capitalize on the drama of it all. It certainly feels that way. Halloween 9 Retribution. A canceled sequel to Halloween Resurrection. From what I've read, this one actually didn't seem too bad. Busta Rhymes would be brought back, again, something a lot of these scripts seem to really want, and would be killed very quickly as well. Another thing these scripts seem to really want. Another really interesting thing to note is it would feature a brief look at 1964, when a young Myers would be incarcerated. He would spook a doctor taking his glasses. Very heinous of you, Michael. There'd be a cut to 1978 where it would be revealed he sharpened the glasses. He kills a doctor with it and initiates that big escape seen in the 78 movie. Another demonstration as to how patient Myers would be. It seemed to want to make Michael scary again instead of the laughing stock he was in Resurrection. Michael Myers has solipsism. A theory to explain why Michael is the way he is. Solipsism syndrome is basically when someone believes reality doesn't exist out of his own mind. Everyone else is just his little play toy. Halloween Asylum 2013. Halloween Asylum was a canceled Halloween film that has some similarities to the Halloween Returns canceled movie we mentioned earlier, but it's way crazier than that movie. In the movie, Michael kills a bunch of teens at a barn that is apparently his birthplace. One of the teens get away, she's all paranoid Mikey is gonna want to finish the job, and she's right. Mikey kills her, there's a time jump, and Mikey is now incarcerated with plans to give him the old electric chair. Unlike the other script where Michael manages to escape only because of a power outage, he gets electrocuted in this one, becoming a much more powerful Myers. Kinda like Myers X, except he doesn't go to space. Lame. Halloween Sam. Not the Sam and Myers crossover you're thinking it might be. I know, I was disappointed too. Halloween Sam is a novelization that follows Loomis's last days in the age 20 timeline, since he isn't very present within it. Even though I feel an easy way to write him out of it is to simply have him die in the massive hospital explosion in Halloween 2. No idea how he lived through that, but okay. I'm assuming he isn't written out this way since originally H20 was a sequel to H6, so when they changed the script they forgot they had an easy way to write Loomis out. Still neat nonetheless. Cult of Thorn references before Halloween 5. Not entirely sure what this one is referring to since there aren't any. Well, at least in the films, in the novelizations of movies, it's hinted that Myers might be possessed by an ancient spirit, but I don't believe any of it has to do with the Cult of Thorn. In Halloween 6, it is mentioned the Thorn Star constellation appears every time Michael attacks. It might be referring to this. The only other thing it could be referencing is Myers writing Sawin on the school wall in Halloween 2. Platinum Dunes Halloween. Platinum Dunes, the company responsible for several horror remakes around the time, had a plan for Halloween as well. One that would include copycats. People were just really determined to make a copycat killer Halloween film, weren't they? I'm honestly shocked it took till 2022 to do it, now knowing how frequently the idea was brought up. Anyways, it would turn a lot of series norms on its head. Judith would be killed at the end of the film. As mentioned earlier, there would be 2 Michaels running around. Michael would have other siblings, one of which is actually a detective trying to stop him. Loomis would also be an FBI agent in this film. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't at least a little bit curious as to how all would play out on screen. A wild but interesting idea. Halloween Son. There isn't too much known about this, but what is known is sort of interesting. Halloween Son was a canceled novel that would have expanded on Halloween 2. We just know Myers would have killed a school teacher, and we see him write Son, so I assume it would have expanded on Michael's attachment to the holiday. Halloween, The Diary of Judith Myers. This one bums me out a little bit. Halloween, The Diary of Judith Myers was going to be a novel that would have gone into more detail about Judith and Michael's home life. I'd be very interesting to learn about the dynamic between the two of them, but also just to learn more about Judith, mostly to learn about Judith, since delving into Michael can always be such a tricky thing. Her death has such a huge impact on the franchise, it would be neat to peek into her mind a bit. The origin of Michael Myers. I looked for quite a while for anything on this, but couldn't find much. I mostly just found more stuff regarding the canceled Halloween 6 movie, Halloween 666, The Origin Plot. H3 Original Draft. The original draft for Halloween Season of the Witch had far less gore in it and was more plot heavy. Eventually, John Carpenter and Tom Wallace rewrote it to be a more gory film. It's sort of similar to Halloween 2's conception. Originally, Halloween 2 was also going to have far less gore in it until John Carpenter hops in. He insisted it should be more violent to keep up with the other slashers at the time. Halloween 3.0. Apparently, 3.0 was going to be a direct sequel to the original Halloween. Laurie would have blown up Myers in an ambulance, and the town would be hunting Myers, so I guess the ambulance explosion doesn't work out. Resurrection was Michael's dream when he was decapitated. This is actually a pretty rad theory that definitely isn't true, but it's a fun one. It's pretty self-explanatory, but for those that don't know, spoilers for Halloween 20 years later in Resurrection, at the end of age 20, Myers gets his head chopped off. This theory just states as he died, he plays out the best case scenario in his head. And when following Resurrection, there's a lot of things that point towards this. Resurrection starts with an environment Myers is familiar with, the hospital. In this fantasy land, he was just too clever for Laurie, swapping places with a worker. He corrects his mistake and kills Laurie. He has an obsessed fan within this mental institution, and the world itself is obsessed with his legacy and house. And of course, at the very end, despite getting slapped around and electrocuted, the man just cannot die. The theory is just saying Resurrection is a powered fantasy for Myers right before he actually gets his head chopped off. Reboot trilogy. This could be pointing to a few things. I imagine it's not pointing to the actual reboot trilogy we got, especially since this is at the bottom of the iceberg. I think it's more likely referring to the other reboot, the Rob Zombie films. There were a few attempts to make a third Rob Zombie Halloween film. I know there was also an attempt to make another Halloween film that would have taken place after 2. We talked about that earlier, but from my knowledge, there wasn't a plan to turn this into a trilogy. Lord of the Dead. Buckle up, this is a bit of a long one. Lord of the Dead wasn't going to be one, but 2 Halloween films that would be shot back to back, with the second film sounding a lot like the modern Halloween Kills, which I find to be pretty funny since there are a lot of cut Halloween scripts that really wanted a doppelganger Myers similar to Halloween Ends. Anyways, in this version of Halloween 6, Tommy and Kara would still be present, but Jamie wouldn't have died. She would be kept breathing throughout the entirety of the film. Instead, Kara Strode would have died at the end of the film, with the murder being blamed on Tommy. This is how Halloween 6 would have ended. Halloween 7 would continue this plotline, basically having Tommy be on the run while a mob begins to form out of anger for all of these murders. They want Tommy dead, and so does Mikey. Halloween 7 would basically just be a horrific nightmare for poor Tommy. At the end of Halloween 7, this mob would have gathered around Jamie with an intent to harm her. Laurie would show up to save the day at the very end, which is neat, but this would still paint her in a pretty horrible position since this means she was a pretty absent mother. I do like the ideas with this script a lot more than what we got for Halloween 6. I always wanted a town versus Haddonfield movie, and I eventually got it, so I'm not too upset this movie didn't happen, but it's cool to see what could have been. Michael isn't connected to Son. This is a fan theory, I believe, trying to explain, well, what it sounds like. Covering for Halloween 2, it's just saying that Myers wasn't actually motivated by Son. It's possible he just has an appreciation for the tradition, so he isn't actually directly connected to it. Michael is possessed by Enda. I believe we went over this a little bit, but in some of the books, it's explained that Myers is possessed by the violent spirit Enda, and that's why he kills people. Every movie breaks canon. It's what it sounds like. Every single movie in the Halloween franchise retcons or changes something from a previous film. Michael's eyes being completely fine in H4, and Loomis being alive after taking an explosion head on. Jamie killing her stepmother is retconned to she just cut her up a little bit. And age 6, he wants to keep Jamie's baby alive despite his drive being to kill all family members. Age 20, Thanos snaps half the timeline out of existence. Resurrection retcons the ending of age 20. The Rob Zombie movies just delete everything from existence and makes Myers completely different. The Blumhouse movies start a new timeline as well. The hat cut. I really searched around. I couldn't find much of anything on the hat cut, but I don't want to leave you guys out on nothing for the last little installment here. So here's a little bit of trivia regarding the new trilogy of movies, since there wasn't a lot of that within this Iceberg. Age 2018 originally had a much more definitive ending. Laurie and Myers would suffer from fatal injuries. Myers would have sat on a log, slowly passing away. This ending included a longer showdown between Myers and Laurie. Shots of this original ending can still be seen in the trailers. The ending was changed after audience reaction to the film was so positive they decided to go with their original plan, leaving the ending a lot more ambiguous for future sequels. Halloween Ends was also going to have a very different ending. Instead of a peaceful ending, Laurie would have nearly attacked Allison, seemingly possessed by evil. I'm glad we got the happier ending. That and Ends was going to connect itself to Halloween 3. At the very end, a row of masks was going to be shown, produced by Silver Shamrock. These masks would be the iconic William Shatner masks, implying Michael is just evil because evil corporation. Glad that also didn't happen. And we are finally done. If you guys would like to see more of these, please let me know. I would be more than happy to make more. I had a lot of fun delving into this, and I would like to make like a Friday the 13th one and other franchises. Please leave a like and subscribe. This took forever to make. Thank you for watching. Take care, and I hope to see you in the next one.